The three main settings we look at when we take pictures is ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. So firstly, in the camera, I shoot with a Nikon D7200. And I guess the camera doesn't really matter. You can use whatever you have. Understanding the main settings I will go over should help anybody who's aspiring to take pictures. So ISO is the first one, and it determines the camera's sensitivity to light. It varies in a range starting at, I think, around 100 to 25,600. And as you increase the ISO, the camera's sensitivity to light, so the image appears brighter. So say ISO 800 or ISO 1200 is a lot brighter than ISO 400 or ISO 200. With the brighter image, you actually get a bit more of noise. Your camera is compensating for the lack of light by creating artificial light. So say in broad daylight, you'd probably be taking with low ISO since there's already so much light around you. You'd take with ISO 200 or 400. If it's nighttime, you'd want to raise your ISO to compensate for the lack of light. So maybe ISO 800, ISO 1600, or ISO 3200. And yeah, you just want to be careful that you don't raise it too high so that the image doesn't come out really pixelated. The next thing we can look at is shutter speed. So shutter speed is how fast your camera clicks. So this sound you're gonna hear, that's your shutter speed. And the higher your shutter speed is, the faster the click. And the faster the click means the camera lets in less light since the camera's open for less time. So say 1 second out of blank. So 1 out of 320, 1 out of 400. As you raise it, you're getting a smaller fraction. So you're getting a faster time reaction that the camera closes and opens its sensor. General thing to note here, if you're taking in broad daylight, you'd want to make the shutter speed higher because you're compensating for, really bright sun. You want to bring down the overall exposure by having the camera sensor open for a short period of time. If it's nighttime, you want to have the shutter speed slower. Now, the last one we're going to look at is aperture. And aperture actually varies depending on your lens. So right here, I have a prime lens, 35 millimeters, and you can actually see the aperture. It's usually written on the lens. Here it's 1.8. And the aperture just tells you how wide open the lens can go. And this width determines the light that's being let into a camera. So the lower the number of your aperture, the larger the lens is open. So I have here 1.8, so this is an f-stop. F1.8 means that a lot of light can be let in, basically. If you can bring this number lower, some lenses can hit 1.4, 1.2. That means that there's even more light being let in because the lens can be open even wider. And the standard lenses you're gonna find usually hover around 3.5 to 5.6 aperture. And this means that it's a bit darker when you're in that setting because the lens isn't open as wide. And I guess another thing to note with the aperture is that it also determines what's in focus in an image. So with a lower aperture, since you're allowing more light in, since the lens is wider open, you actually capture less stuff in focus in an image. So if you have the aperture at 1.8, for example, that's usually when you're taking portraits and you want the background to be blurred, when you want bokeh in your image. In contrast, if you have your aperture a lot higher, like 5.6 or f4, a lot more things are in focus, but at the same time, overall darker image since the lens isn't open as wide. So that is a brief run through, and you just want to take note that when you're taking pictures, it's about balancing all these three. And since they all interact with light, I guess it's just best to know or best to remember how they each interact with light so that you can find the best combination. I guess tips for me would be, I think you just have to shoot more. There's no other way to get better than to just keep creating, right? Even if, we're stuck at home right now, maybe just try to shoot an action figure, try to shoot one of your favorite, like toys or something, and just get a lot of practice because the only way you can learn is trial and error. You can understand all the theory, you can understand how the settings work, but then if you never apply it, you're never gonna know in the real case how it's actually applied, right? You're never gonna have it intuitive. And I think that's the goal, that once you keep shooting, once you get comfortable with playing around with cameras, all the settings, all the settings become second nature to you, and it should be really easy. And it becomes really easy for you to know how to take the image. You don't produce great images overnight, that's for sure. Like out of 100, 1,000 images, probably only one would be good. And I think that's already enough sometimes. Watch a lot of YouTube also, I'd say. Like there are a lot of good photographers out there that you can take advice from. and you can just observe other people's technique and try to integrate it into yours, right? My photography inspirations. So one of them would have to be Emmett Sparling, because his pictures are all about travel photography, and the colors just overall look very nice. It looks so cool to play the seagulls. Who else? I also really like Sam Colder, so very mainstream if you guys are familiar with all his videos, his travel type of videos. But then, yeah, I think when I found him back in like 2016, it was a very niche like YouTube portion, doing travel videos. So it was really cool to see how creative you can get with essentially just pictures of with videos of places and such. Like, I think his name's Yip Kiat. So he's a Singaporean, and his pictures are graded, color graded, really nice. You check his Instagram, all the pictures look really coordinated, and they give the exact same vibe. So you can really distinguish his type of style, and I think that's what constitutes a good photographer in my eyes. You can very elaborately see the types of pictures he takes, and you can really tell if he took it because his style is very distinct and it's very different. I also really like Edward KV and Lee Elaine because they take a lot of really nice pictures with really good colors. So I'm mostly just the colors and the creativity when they take the shot. So those are my inspirations. I hope you find your own also because it's important that you are always immersed, I guess, in the world if you want to get better. There's only one way, and that's really just practicing and looking at how other people do it. Just get ideas, get inspiration, and overall just better your own work.